The cold wasn't supposed to come from inside the house, yet the first time I felt it rising through the floorboards, I knew something was terribly wrong. It wasn't the sharp, outdoor winter chill, it was heavier, older, as if the house itself was exhaling after years of holding its breath. I had moved into the place in late November, when the Midwest sky hung low and bruised above the empty fields. The real estate listing called it rustic. In truth, it looked forgotten. Paint peeling like shed skin. Windows clouded with the film couldn't scrub away. But something about its loneliness felt familiar, and I told myself I would finally have a quiet winter. During the first night, I noticed the temperature inside dropping faster than outside. My breath hung in front of me, even though the thermostat insisted the furnace was running. I pressed my palm to the vent, warm air puffed out in weak bursts, but the room remained frozen, as if the heat evaporated before touching anything. By morning, the cold had seeped into my bones. I wrapped myself in blankets, drank steaming coffee, but nothing helped. The warmth didn't stay. It fled the moment it touched my skin. I tried blaming the weather. People said early winter could be cruel, especially in this part of the country. But this cold didn't behave like weather. It moved deliberately, creeping through the halls, curling around corners, sinking into the walls as though searching for something. On the third night, I woke to a brittle, cracking sound beneath me. The hardwood floor felt icy enough to burn. I followed the sound to the guest bedroom hadn't used yet. When I opened the door, a wave of frost rolled out, thick enough to sting my face. The air inside was shimmering white, as if the room had been sealed inside a freezer for years. My footsteps left prints in the frost on the wooden boards. Near the far wall, the cold concentrated in one spot, a perfect circle, darker than the rest of the floor. A slow pulse of frozen air rose from it, steady and unnatural, like the rhythm of something breathing deep underground. The circle hadn't been there when I moved in. I knew that for certain. What I didn't know, what I refused to acknowledge then, was why the house felt colder each time I walked past that room, as if the darkness beneath the floor was waiting for me to notice it. I kept the guest room door shut after that, but the cold pushed through the wood as if the room were inhaling the rest of the house. Each day, the temperature dropped another degree, and the furnace struggled harder. I wrapped towels under the door, sealed the vents, even layered plastic across the frame, but nothing slowed the creeping chill. By the end of the week, the cold had seeped into the hallway walls. When I touched them, they felt damp, like stone left outside in a storm. I found frost on the light switches, delicate and crystalline, forming new patterns every morning: spirals, branching lines, shapes that looked disturbingly intentional. I told myself winter simply came early, that old houses behaved strangely. I tried to believe it, but deep down, something inside me tightened every time the floorboards sighed under their own weight. The house wasn't settling, it was stirring. One night, after a long day spent in every coffee shop I could find just to feel warmth again, I opened my front door and felt a drift of icy air slide across my feet. The thermostat glowed a stubborn number, but the hallway was pale with frost, as if a storm had blown through while I was gone. I forced myself to walk down the hall. The cold didn't feel random anymore, it felt guided. When I reached the guest room door, I could see faint pale mist curling out from the cracks around the frame. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound beneath the floorboards. Not pipes, not settling, something softer, drawn out, almost like long, steady breaths rising through the wood. My throat tightened. I backed away, refusing to look directly at the door. I slept on the couch that night with every light on, though it did nothing to slow the eerie, freezing pulse that crawled through the walls. Morning came with a new change. The frost patterns had grown. They stretched from the guest room down the hallway, branching like white veins. When I brushed one with my sleeve, it didn't melt. Instead, a strange sensation shot through me, not pain, but something hollow and draining, leaving me lightheaded for a moment. I straightened and stared at the pattern, realizing it pointed in one unmistakable direction, toward the basement door. I hadn't been down there yet. The previous owner left no instructions, no warnings, just a rusted key on a nail beside the frame. As I stood there, staring at the frost-lined path leading downward, a quiet, sick certainty grew inside me. The cold wasn't rising from the guest room. It was climbing up from the basement. I stood at the top of the basement stairs for a long time, holding the railing so tightly my fingers throbbed. The cold drifting up from the darkness felt different now, not sharp, but strangely weighted, as if carrying something hidden inside it. My breath came out in trembling clouds that floated downward, disappearing into the shadows as if swallowed. When I finally stepped onto the first stair, the wood felt damp beneath my foot. By the third step, my socks clung to my skin, carrying a chill that sank into my bones. Halfway down, the air changed again. The cold was no longer spreading, it was pulsing. Slow, steady, patient, like something aware of every inch of me. I reached the basement floor and froze. The frost patterns from upstairs weren't random branches after all. Down here, without the distortion of wallpaper and carpet, they were unmistakably shaped. A swirling ring across the concrete, lines streaking outward, curling, folding, looping into one another like a symbol I was never meant to see. Every stroke of frost looked deliberate, carved by something with endless time and absolute intent. In the center of the ring stood an object. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. The old house listing had mentioned a repaired furnace, but I realized now the furnace wasn't repaired, it was replaced. And whatever stood in the basement was far older than anything that belonged to modern heating. It was metallic, but the surface seemed almost organic, as if it had grown into its own shape over decades. Frost crawled across every inch of it, thickest around the front panel. That panel was open. Inside, a faint blue glow pulsed in slow intervals, each one sending a drift of icy air upward. With every pulse, my chest heightened, as though the cold were pressing a hand against my ribs from the inside. I took one step closer. A faint whisper, soft, thin, barely a sound, rose from the machine. It wasn't speech. It wasn't even noise, not exactly. It felt more like a presence brushing against my thoughts, sliding under them, threading through memories I had spent years trying to forget. My lonely childhood winters, my silent rooms, my longing for anything that felt steady. The cold deepened as if responding to that loneliness, curling around me with quiet understanding. Only then did I notice the patterns on the far wall, scratches in the frost that looked like fingerprints dragged slowly downward. They were spaced too far apart for one person. Too uneven. Too many. A wave of dizziness hit me. I backed away, but the cold followed, clinging to my clothes, my hair, the air pulsing harder with each breath I took. I stumbled toward the stairs, but the frost ring at my feet tightened, its edges thickening, rising like tiny white teeth. My heartbeat thrashed against my ribs. I lunged for the first stair. Before I touched it, the air behind me shifted. A shape stepped out of the blue glow, tall, thin, its outline barely visible except where the frost clung to its surface. The silhouette was wrong, too long in some places, too narrow in others, and yet familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. Something about its posture, the way its head tilted slightly toward me, just like someone I had always tried to forget. The impossible resemblance froze me to the spot. It wasn't a person. It couldn't be, but it stood like one, moved like one, watched me like one. The cold tightened around my throat. I turned and ran up the stairs, slipping, clawing at the railing. I didn't stop until I burst into the hallway, slamming the door behind me. My lungs burned as I pressed my back against the wood, waiting for footsteps, movement, anything. Nothing came. Only the low, steady pulse of cold spreading through the house. That was days ago. Now, the frost patterns cover every hallway, every wall, every window. I can barely see outside, they've grown too thick. The air inside feels heavy, as if I'm breathing through winter itself. I can't leave. The doors won't open. The locks are frozen so deeply, can't even turn them. I sleep in fragments, wrapped in all the blankets I own, listening to the steady, rhythmic breaths rising from beneath the floorboards. And at night, when the house grows still, I hear a faint shift at the top of the basement stairs. The shape waits there, silent, patient, not moving any closer, not needing to, because with every hour that passes, the house grows colder, and I feel myself growing colder with it. That was the same night I joined the Winter Search and Rescue Patrol, hoping the long, empty evenings wouldn't gnaw holes in my thoughts like they usually did in December. I've seen strange things out on Lake Superior, but nothing prepared me for the sight of a lone silhouette standing perfectly still on the newly frozen surface, its arm lifted as if trying to catch someone's attention. At first, I thought it was a prank. Nobody would walk onto fresh ice willingly. Not out here. Not with water deep enough to swallow a house. My partner, Lewis, spotted it too. We were halfway through our sweep, our headlights cutting thin tunnels through the swirling snow. When the beam touched the frozen lake, the figure didn't turn, didn't shift, just kept that same motionless pose, arm raised toward the shore. We approached on foot, stepping carefully onto the ice, listening for cracks beneath us. Cold wind scraped across my face, sharp enough to sting. The figure didn't move even as we got closer. Its outline wavered in the snowstorm, flickering between shadow and shape, as if the storm didn't know how to hold it together. But when we reached the spot, there was no one. Just a perfect, circular opening carved into the ice. Not broken, not shattered. Carved smooth, dark, impossibly precise. It didn't look like something fell through. It looked like something rose out. The water beneath was black and impossibly still. No ripples, no movement. But when I leaned forward, when my breath drifted over the opening, I saw it. Something shifting far below the surface. Not a fish, not a person. Something smooth, pale, and long, gliding just out of reach of the light. I stumbled back, but Lewis didn't flinch. He just stared down at the water, whispering that the cold was messing with my vision. That early winter hallucinations weren't uncommon. That staring too long into unfrozen pockets could create illusions. But illusions don't move in slow, deliberate circles. Illusions don't follow your breath. We filed a report that night. Nobody believed us. No1 had been reported missing. No footprints were found. No signs of anyone approaching the lake. The next evening, during our patrol, the figure returned. Same posture, same distance from shore, same raised arm. Lewis cursed under his breath, insisting it was a trick of the light. I wasn't so sure. Something about the stillness of the silhouette felt wrong, too steady, too anchored to a place humans feared to stand. This time, we approached faster, hoping to catch whoever or whatever it was. Snow whipped around us, the lake groaning beneath the growing weight of winter. But just like before, when we reached the center of the ice, the silhouette vanished. And at our feet, another perfect circle cut into the surface. Another opening into black, frozen silence. Only this time the shape below the water wasn't far away. It drifted just beneath the ice, brushing the underside like a hand trailing along a ceiling. Long fingers, too long. I felt every hair on my neck rise. Lewis kept telling me it was a winter mirage. Light bending, shadows playing tricks. But when I looked away, when I forced myself to blink, the memory of the silhouette stayed burned behind my eyelids. And I realized something that chilled me deeper than the wind. The figure had appeared at exactly 7:13 p.m. each night. Not earlier, not later. As if it wasn't wandering, as if it was following a schedule, as if it was waiting. The third night was colder than the others. The kind of cold that doesn't just press against the skin, but slips beneath it, settling into the spaces between bone and breath. I almost didn't go out. My hands wouldn't stop trembling while I laced my boots, and every inhale scraped my lungs raw. But skipping a patrol wasn't an option, not for me. Not with the lake calling itself a safe zone for winter hikers who didn't know how fast weather could flip. Lewis joked earlier that I looked like I hadn't slept in days. He wasn't wrong. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure's posture, the rigid stillness, the raised arm, the way it seemed to wait with inhuman patience. It didn't feel like a person asking for help. It felt like something imitating the idea of help. Practiced, perfected. We reached the lake at 6:50 p.m. The sky was a sheet of dark gray, the horizon barely visible through fine needles of snow. The ice groaned under the first real weight of winter, cracks forming deep beneath the surface like distant thunder. I kept checking my watch. 6:59, 7:04, 7:08. Lewis paced, muttering to himself, his breath drifting into the storm. I stood still, listening to the wind, to the strain of the ice shifting below us. Every sound felt like a warning. Every vibration felt like a heartbeat. At 7:13 p.m., the snow thinned just enough for the lake to reveal what I already feared. The figure was back. Same distance, same height, same terrifying stillness. Only this time, it was closer to the shore, at least 30 feet closer than the night before. My chest tightened, the cold pressed harder. The storm felt suddenly unnaturally quiet around us, as if it were holding its breath too. Lewis whispered something, but I barely caught it. My attention was locked on the figure's outline, dark, elongated, unmoving. It didn't sway with the wind. It didn't brace against the cold. Its raised arm pointed toward us like a command. We walked toward it again, though every instinct in me screamed not to. The ice felt thinner underfoot than it had any right to be. A low groan vibrated through my legs with each step. My mouth had gone dry, my pulse thudding hard behind my eyes. When we were halfway there, I noticed something new. The footprints. Last time, there had been nothing but smooth ice leading to that circular opening. But now, scattered prints trailed across the surface in a strange, uneven pattern. They weren't shaped like boots or shoes. They were long, narrow, too narrow to support a human body without sinking. And every print was dusted with frost from the inside out, as if whatever made them carried winter beneath its skin. Lewis crouched to examine one. His breath froze mid-air, his shoulders tensed. But before either of us could react, the figure vanished. The storm swallowed the spot where it had stood, and I felt the air tighten around us, rippling the frost at my feet. The ice ahead of us cracked, not fractured, not shattered, but split in a perfect circle. Another opening, but unlike the others, this one wasn't still. Water churned below, slow and deliberate, as though stirred by something too large to see clearly. Shapes glided beneath the surface, smooth, pale lines that twisted upward, brushing the underside of the ice as if searching for thin points. Lewis grabbed my arm. The ice under us shifted. A deep, resonant sound rose from below, so low it didn't feel like noise at first. More like pressure, more like the lake itself exhaling after being still too long. I stepped back instinctively. The cold immediately deepened, stinging my cheeks, stiffening my fingers through my gloves. It felt purposeful, directed. Something wanted us there, something beneath the surface. The wind picked up, snow swirling around our ankles as if trying to pull us closer. The footprints behind us had started to frost over completely, sealing the path back to shore. And that's when I realized a detail I had missed the night before, a detail so small, didn't understand its meaning until now. All three openings were moving, not randomly, not drifting, aligning, forming a path across the lake. A path leading straight toward a darker region of ice, far beyond the normal patrol boundary. A region the locals never talked about. A region the older maps refused to label. And at the very edge of the storm, barely visible through the flurry, something tall and thin stood waiting, not on the ice this time, but inside it. Watching, listening, as if anticipating our next step. The moment I saw the shape trapped inside the ice, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't lying flat like a person who had fallen through. It stood upright, pressed perfectly vertical inside the frozen sheet, as if the lake had grown around it like a cocoon. Its posture mirrored the figure we had been following, arm lifted, body rigid, silhouette stretched into unnatural proportions. But inside the ice, in the blur of frost and faint blue light, I could see details I hadn't before. Two long limbs, fingers tapering into uneven points, a head angled just slightly downward, as if studying us through the frost. Lewis whispered that we needed to retreat, but my legs refused to move. Something about the figure's stillness held me in place. Silent, patient, a presence that felt older than the lake itself. The three circular openings we'd seen before, smooth, impossibly precise, aligned in a straight line, their edges frosting over in synchronized pulses, pushing outward, guiding us toward the dark patch of ice where the upright figure waited. Lewis grabbed my sleeve, trying to pull me back, but the path behind us didn't exist anymore. The frost had grown so thick, it looked like a wall of shimmering white that swallowed everything beyond a few feet. The shoreline had vanished, the trees, the road, even the rescue vehicle. We were alone with the lake. A groan rose beneath us, long, trembling, almost organic. The ice didn't crack, it resonated, vibrating through my boots, through my bones, up into my teeth. I staggered forward, clutching at the wind, which had turned deathly still. Louis nearly slipped, his hands flailing for balance. The lake wasn't breaking, it was waking. Something below the surface moved with a slow, spiraling rhythm, gliding beneath the aligned openings. Its pale shape brushed against the ice, tracing deliberate circles. Each pass made the temperature drop another degree. My breath barely formed a cloud anymore. The air was too heavy, too cold, too thick to hold anything warm. Louis tried calling for help, but the wind swallowed every sound. No radio signal, no echo, nothing. As we stepped backward, trying to find any direction that felt safe, the upright figure inside the ice shifted. It didn't move like a living thing. There was no jerk, no struggle. It simply changed position, its head tilting more sharply, its long fingers lowering a few inches as though acknowledging us. Ice doesn't bend like that, but the ice around it didn't break. Instead, it softened, fogging, pulsing faintly with a blue glow. I stumbled, falling onto my hands. Frost bit through my gloves like teeth. My fingertips went numb instantly, as if the ice had burrowed into the fabric. The aligned openings widened. Louis helped me stand, but the moment he did, the lake reacted. Not by cracking outward, by pulling inward. Like mouths inhaling, the water below churned, spiraling faster, far faster than any natural current. Pale shapes drifted just beneath the surface. Too many, too slow, too aware. They twisted and looped through the dark, never fully rising, but never sinking. Then something surfaced. Not fully, even halfway. Just enough for a shape smooth, pale, long to break the surface and graze the edge of the nearest opening. It stayed there for a moment, clinging to the underside of the ice with a thin, translucent grip that reminded me horribly of fingers. Louis backed away, dragging me with him. But the lake didn't let go. Frost erupted beneath our feet, cracking in thin, branching lines. Not downward, but outward. Reaching, encircling, like something beneath the ice was trying to trace our outline through the frozen surface. I turned just in time to see the upright figure vanish from inside the ice. Not melt, not crumble, simply gone. A moment later, a tall shadow stood 10 feet away from us on the surface of the lake, arms still raised, body still rigid, posture identical, but no longer trapped. It stood directly on the aligned openings, as if marking the center of something ancient and deliberate. The lake exhaled. A deep, resonant pulse shook the air, and the ice beneath our feet thinned in an instant. I dropped to my knees as the frost melted into glossy translucence. Through it, I saw pale shapes rising, slowly, gracefully, as if ascending to greet us. Louis grabbed my hand, but I barely felt it. My skin had gone numb. My breath barely left my lungs. The cold wasn't weather anymore. It had intention. It had memory. It had purpose. The shadow on the ice lowered its arm. The ice opened beneath us. Not shattered, opened. I plunged downward. The water swallowed me in a single, silent moment. The cold hit with a force so complete, it felt like my own heartbeat vanished. I sank fast, the dark pressing against my vision, pale shapes circling me in slow spirals. One brushed my shoulder, guiding me deeper, gentle in a way that made it somehow worse. Before the last of the light faded above, I looked up and saw Louis still on the ice, reaching for me with shaking hands. His mouth was open in a silent scream, his face ghost pale against the storm. But what froze my blood wasn't his expression. As the water closed over my head, the pale shape circled tighter, guiding me downward toward the dark place beneath the lake where the openings had always led. I understood then. The figure was never signaling for help. It was signaling for replacements.